Innovative energy sector secrets and big picture solutions shared at Energy, Sustainability and Infrastructure ESI 2022 Summit. After the recent success of the Energy, Sustainability and Infrastructure ESI Summit presented by Henosis Foundation, this article shares industry innovation, energy sector secrets, along with big picture solutions offered to leaders in the energy and infrastructure industries. Henosis Foundation's founder, DanieldeCastellane, speaks at the ESI Summit. Photo, Rick Kern, Getty Images. After the recent success of the Energy, Sustainability, and Infrastructure ESI Summit presented by Henosis Foundation, many in the media, technology, and business sector have been abuzz with the new information shared with those present at this prestigious event. The summit, which assembled influential leaders in the energy and infrastructure industries, discussed big-picture solutions in the energy sector, one such challenge being the immediate need for innovative, deployable, and commercially feasible alternative energy solutions. The attendees of the summit were left with the divine energy that is emanated when heroic leaders come together with the shared goal of transforming the world. One major takeaway from this summit was the work of featured partner, Texas-owned Diamond Infrastructure Development, Inc. Diddy, a groundbreaking force in alternative energy, led by Jorg Engelman, President and CEO, and Kenneth W. Welch Jr., board member, successful and highly merited inventor with a career stretching back over the last 5 decades. Many have lost sight of the early origins, motivations, and goals of the global environmental movement towards maintaining and preserving our planet, and how recently this movement began. Just decades ago in 1968, the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations included environmental issues for the first time as a specific discussion item, and organized the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment. From that point onward, growth and demand for energy solutions rapidly expanded along with the need for clean water as global populations grew. From the late 1970 onward, the world began to recognize a slew of environmental incidents and event catastrophes around the world, connecting into a constellation of impact. These incidents ranged from the nuclear incident at 3 Mile Island to the EPA intervention at Love Canal, the introduction of gas oil into our cars, and the sinking of whaling ships in Spain. The movement to save the rainforests in Brazil began in the same decade as the discovery of the hole in the ozone layer over Antarctica, the Union Carbide chemical spill in Virginia, and the notorious meltdown at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Closing out the decade of the 1980 was the oil spill at Valdez, and finally the formation of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC). Some of our most treasured corners of the world were becoming polluted, other areas were becoming challenged due to extraction and conflict. The 1990 faced its own set of challenges, with oil spills and fires in Kuwait, the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, and the UN General Assembly resolution which banned drift net fishing. In 1995, Greenpeace activists occupied a North Sea oil rig. With global rapid expansion, Earth's population exceeded 6 billion human souls, with half living in cities. But even with all of our advancements, almost half of the planet, 2.8 billion people, lived on less than $2 a day. UN agencies noted that while globalization of trade had helped in some countries, the poor were becoming poorer, both in absolute and in relative terms. Since the year 2000, the last 2 decades have seen a global revolution to clean and renewable forms of power, along with the refinement of desalination and clean water drinking systems. We have seen a battle being fought by many world-class inventors and innovators with similar ideas and concepts, from sunlight to thermal energy to wine, tidal, fusion systems and others, but no concrete and unified solution to address the unrest around our energy systems worldwide, nor our rapid growth. The problem with the world today is we have been too slow at solving some of these major problems, including our insatiable thirst for energy. We have an increased need for electricity to power our homes, devices, and enterprises, but we must be able to thrust forward without energy systems having a negative impact on our planet and our lives. The easy problems are already solved. But some of humanity's hardest problems need better answers, such as solving the global grid system. That's where ESI featured speaker and winner of the Inventor of the Year award for the most impactful invention benefiting humanity, Kenneth W. Welch Jr., comes in. We shouldn't panic, he shared at this year's summit. Our companies and others have powerful answers. It's a time of change, and our generation is up to the challenge. Our planet is simply not willing to lose. Indeed, we should take great pride knowing our innovators, companies, corporations, and foundations have aligned with governmental agencies around the world to make change and better the human living condition along with the betterment of life of all species on planet Earth. Mr. Welch Jr. Continued, too many think too little of our species. I would like to think that there is a lot of hope in our ingenuity, our generosity, and our love for one another that will get us through these stormy times we are currently living. It always seems that life has to become its worst long before we can find better solutions and the better part of living. Many in attendance at the summit were relieved that there is a solution to today's problems. As we know, humankind has always prevailed, and there have always been breakthrough thinkers and innovators who have steered us forward and transformed the trajectory of human history. One speaker at the event cited the Amish concept of barn raising for inspiration for our current times, wherein communities find joy and value in participating in joint cooperative work projects combined with socializing towards practical goals like building a barn. Our joint cooperation and ingenuity can solve big problems selflessly devoted to the good of the community, and a barn can be raised in just one day, or our planet repaired in just a few years. I'd like to think the people of our global society are in general this type of folk. As a species, our biggest need is survival. You see our spirit when natural disasters happen across our planet, people band together. Sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of people gather to take on the issue of the day without thought of personal gain. I think maybe it's time that a good old-fashioned barn raising takes place on this topic of climate change. The speakers went on to explain the trajectory of abundance that is meant for our planet and the new technologies that would sidestep the errors of yesteryear to address our modern challenges. All in attendance left with the knowledge that it is time that we fearlessly take a leap for humanity into tomorrow's future, leaving the past unworkable systems behind. The revolutionary leaders at Diamond Infrastructure Development, Inc. then shared some of the decades of research, trial, error, and innovation that led them to their acquisition of the Sea-Dog Systems technologies. At that point, the summit welcomed founder and president and CEO of Diamond Infrastructure Development, Inc., energy guru for the last 25 years or longer, who has fought the oceans and the sea with some of the largest oil companies in the world, laying pipelines beneath the waters, platforms on top of the oceans, and nearly everything the industry had to offer in offshore technology. He now finds himself immersed in the world of land-based wave energy, taking the wave to shore where it can be tamed and harnessed. Mr. Angelman went on to explain the proprietary technologies of their extraordinary dam-free wave energy systems coming to fruition with Diddy. Explaining further, the hydropower nexus, using water to create power, whether tidal, wave, current, river, etc., employs systems utilizing the undulating currents/flows or waves that then create mechanical or hydroelectric power. These breakthrough innovations developed a pump to power a series of pistons to push a high-pressure flow of water over a turbine, creating a seamless supply of energy, a powerful mechanical system developed to produce clean and abundant power. With this goal in mind, Mr. Welch developed the Sea-Dog energy stalling device. The inventors asked the question, how do we create and end up with stable and reliable sea states, providing a constant repeatable wave? It became apparent the best use of our technology was not going to happen at sea. The only time we ever saw such a thing was in an artificial wave tank, like ours, up near Lake Conroe at our research facilities, or other facilities we have visited around the country, creating harmonic vibration in the form of a constant standing wave. That's where the energy should come from. The perfect wave, the aha moment happened. So, the solution presented was right in front of them, and that solution was to bring the wave onto the land and make it cost-effective. That would allow common usage across a large swath of humanity, cities, towns, and poor rural villages. Seemingly almost impossible, though if possible, it would be divine. Then it happened and was developed and proven to be sustainable via testing over many years, providing the final outcome that this innovative new technology actually works. He went on to continue, the second part of the puzzle was the ability to maintain electricity energy production at 365 constant efficiency near that of nuclear power when operating at around 90%. This would require a new device to make standing waves, which is currently under trade secret and proprietary status, delivering a standing waveform for continuous standing waves for nearly 1/1/0th the energy of a normal wave maker. This device has a principle and concept similar to that of a pump jack in an oil field, with a long operational life, low energy input requirement, and wonderfully powerful extraction principles. This same concept is what gave the vision to producing the wave energy fulcrum pond pounder that became known as the Sea-Dog wave pond system, a truly dynamic power energy saver, making this new wave energy form possible for grid-scale energy production for billions of dollars less overall than operating at sea. When most energy resources are spent not on revolutionizing, but instead are aimed at repairing and replacing technology with short lifespans, the realization of that vision is pushed far down the pipeline. The new hydropower nexus, presented by Diamond Infrastructure Development, Inc., the technology's license holder, is the next step towards realizing that vision of an energy system they see as being fully sustainable, clean, and ethically sourced. They went on to further share their calculations and testing, providing industry secrets about the most efficient pond lengths at which to operate these systems. Though these technologies may seem future-forward, these concepts had been seen since the 1800s with varying degrees of success, but limited mass adoption. Ocean wave canals just weren't feasible. The final step in the solution process for onshore usage was evaporation. The constant need for fluid, like nuclear power, a large power plant producing a gigawatt, requires nearly 1 billion gallons of water a day in evaporation alone. Dam/reservoir storage has similar losses daily, with partial inches of water evaporation lost to the atmosphere. By creating this inside of a building or beneath the ground, and where we have more stable temperatures year-round, by putting a strong roof foundation on it, nearly stops all evaporation. Let alone, we can still use the dirt from the excavation that can be piled on top of that foundation for farming or other practical uses, making us unobtrusive, environmentally sound, while giving back the valuable area of space used for operating in a plethora of positive purposes such as housing, buildings, farms, forests, parks, etc. Our future technology will change everything we know about the abundance of water and power, a formula that will stabilize the wave of tomorrow to perform in true abundance, without the losses of water used in nearly all other forms of energy production. The next part of the article will outline the new way of approaching business models for all industries related to global infrastructure in relation to these cutting-edge energy systems for a faster global recovery, greater growth, and expansion without collapse, and unpack the issues and corruption behind companies like Tesla. Innovative energy sector secrets and big picture solutions shared at ESI Summit 2022 and why the Tesla model won't work. Section 2. Section 1 of the article discussed the recent success of the Energy, Sustainability, and Infrastructure ESI Summit presented by Henosis Foundation and offered key takeaways and industry secrets from influential leaders in the energy and infrastructure industries. One major issue that many in the media, technology, and business sector have been contemplating is the need for big picture solutions for innovative, deployable, and commercially feasible energy solutions. Many attendees of the summit left feeling enlightened, invigorated, and inspired. One attendee shared, "I can now make an informed decision as to where to invest my resources that will actually produce true sustainability and revolutionary industry outcomes. That answer lies in hydropower." This quote was in reference to an exhilarating speech given by Texas-owned Diamond Infrastructure Development, Inc., a groundbreaking force in alternative energy, led by Georg Engelmann, President and CEO, and Kenneth W. Welch, Jr., successful and highly merited inventor with a career stretching back over the last 5 decades, and winner of Inventor of the Year Award 2022 for the most impactful invention benefiting humanity, offered by the Henosis Foundation. The DIDI technologies, which are outlined in our previous article, would make the full-scale shift into advanced hydropower onshore wave-driven systems a reality, implementing the CDOG wave pump and the suite of technologies developed by Mr. Welch, Jr. toward the deployment of the global oceanic and CDOG systems energy technology suite, which provides a truly clean, recyclable, cold, grid-scale wave energy-driven hydropower system that works on the same order of economic and fiscal efficiency as hydroelectric dams. Without the dam, the numerous environmental impacts of dams, or the disastrous consequences caused by a large-scale dam failure with virtually no evaporation losses. See diagram above. One of the major industry secrets that was shared reached far beyond these sustainable technologies. It exposed a massive gap in the logic/planning of the global grid infrastructure systems. They are obsolete, overstressed, and not capable of additional capacity factor growth, without major overhaul. This leads to one major leading-edge technology, the electric car, as an example of progress in the wrong direction, a massive consumer of electricity. This is disguised as a forward-thinking, energy-conservative measure of change, brought to you by a leader in this industry as the Tesla model for future transportation. This product alone, if exchanged for the fossil-fueled car, would increase the annual energy consumption of the United States by approximately 166. This growth is not possible using today's current energy infrastructure system, leaving you with a simple conclusion that this product is simply a scam. There is no juice to operate it. As we know, in the past decades since the inception of the global environmental movement in 1968 at the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, we have seen a global revolution towards clean and renewable forms of power, and a battle being fought by many world-class inventors and innovators with similar ideas and concepts, from sunlight to thermal energy to wind, tidal, fusion systems, and others. But no concrete and unified solution to address the unrest around our energy systems and rapid growth of consumption of electricity, nor any global plan for infrastructure growth in the global grid systems to accommodate it. Our environmental movement is relatively new in the scale of human history, and thus it is pivotal that we take an informed stance and weigh all of our options concerning the best possible solutions to renewable energy without blindly pouring our resources into systems that will be impossible to implement en masse. Millions in advertising have been invested into making some alternative energy companies appear green when they actually have a hidden environmental footprint, be it through use of toxic rare earth mining, non-recyclable waste, or subsidized systems without true feasibility of scale. And worst of all, nowhere to offer their energy in the national/international grid system that is already overextended, as stated above. So, Mr. Welch said, what is the overarching problem? And then went on to say, it's simple, removing fossil fuel in exchange for green energy is the only possible system without fixing the global grid. The problem here is these costly consumers of tax credits and subsidies don't provide or offer a solution to the problem. They only create a short-term exchange at best. These throwaway new alternative techs' lifespans of 15-20 years make them unsustainable. The only thing driving this market is the desire for change, and marketers are loving it, and taxpayers are paying for it all while getting greater and greater brownouts and blackouts for their tax dollars while adding more electrical consumption to their lives. The irony of it all, unsustainable products on their roofs or covering their lands without any concept that there's no grid to put the juice into without the removal of a fossil fuel. Well, this doesn't allow any growth at all. So, where's the power for my new electric toys coming from? And what do the marketers say? Oh, don't worry about that. There's always going to be enough juice for everything. The great lie, there isn't enough juice for anything more. And it's been this way for a good while. After 30 years, this business model of fossil fuel exchange for alternative energy has barely touched 20% of the global grid turnaround, and the brownouts and the blackouts continue going, and the consumption of electricity growth, and its burden, only grows and grows. And now it's time to replace the first round of alternative energy. So, I guess the next 30 years will be to simply replace the first 30 years and maintain this 20% exchange. Odd, isn't it? This model does not offer growth energy to power any of these new energy concepts. In fact, this model only leaves the global grid deteriorating further and further and burdens it with higher and higher demands. Just the demand for exchange is not a plan, it's a disaster. You can quickly see again in this overall picture, this is just a marketing scam. And the producers of these products know it and know they are not solving anything, nor do they care. Green is for the money, not actually green. We are not getting greener, nor are we getting cleaner. It's an illusion. In the end, this plan leads to the collapse of the global grid by overdemand of consumption with a greater cost and tax burden on current and future generations. We are heading, by all accounts, into the dark ages. This is not the direction to brighter light. We have the power to come together and invest in a system that will truly offer clean and affordable energy to our planet, but we must not be too hasty in making that choice. Whichever system we invest in will require billions in dollars, expend strenuous resources, and require the time and manpower for mass-scale implementation. We must thoroughly understand our options before full-scale taxpayer investment, and we have simply been too generous in our trust for companies like Tesla. There are other, more sustainable, investment opportunities to explore, like what? Again, this is not the problem. The problem is the usability and capability of the global grid to accept more energy. So foolishly, let's make more products that use electricity and build more products that produce electricity, but then have nowhere to put their power into. So, building new, short-term, expensive green tech, such as wind, solar, etc., makes little sense. Leaving only the consumption as the nightmare of growth without a plan in place leads to greater blackouts, rolling brownouts, etc., to grow and grow. But first, let's unpack why the Tesla model concept for clean, green cars simply won't cut it. Owning such a vehicle, adding it to your household, would just simply increase your consumption to 166 of your electrical needs without adding any additional electrical devices to your world. Phones, computers, electrical stoves, etc. This again leads you quickly to the concept, where does the juice come from to fulfill this dream? Understand, this doesn't make the dream bad, there's just no power for it. The issue here though is they are aware there's no power for this car. They are also aware that they are consuming the subsidies that would fix the grid, and they are complicit in this process, which is saddening since this is only adding additional stress on the real solution that need to be made while exhausting the funds to do it with. We have reached a point in global infrastructure where our concepts for development using subsidies, tax credits, offsets, etc., take for granted that whatever we create that requires electricity, it will just be there to use. This is just no longer realistic in the world, and hasn't been this way for quite a while. For example, take a company like Tesla, this magnificent company being built as a gigafactory in Austin, Texas. They feel they are doing their part. They put the renewable energy systems on the roof of the building to be green and not consume their electricity from the grid from Austin, so as to not put a strain on the grid to the best of their ability. grid, but the actual product they produce is nothing but a vacuum on the energy resource of Austin's grid. If all the cars they produce were simply to go to the people of Austin, for example, there would not be enough power in the grid to sustain those electric cars, let alone the city of Austin. One expert at the ESI Summit shared the facts. The average horsepower under continuous use is around 20 horsepower, or 15 kW a day, using the average of around 1.5 hours daily per vehicle driven, which includes the average household with 1.88 cars, added to the 25 kW of normal use needed daily for the average household energy consumption. So, in this relationship of an average 66% increase in the daily kW used by the average household, there's just not enough energy in the operating grid to sustain the activity of the electric car. Should you provide an electric car to 1 million households, then only 34% of the households would have the electric juice to operate their home. So those 1 million cars could operate. This is a serious dilemma in bringing the electric car to market. Our current grid does not support such growth anywhere, in any country, for cars. There's surely not enough for the households, let alone both. If we put aside the very real supply chain issues with battery-powered energy and the rare earth metals required that are mined in unsafe and toxic pollutant environments, the even bigger problem is the overextension of the grid. As was outlined in the Washington Post, plug-in cars are the future. The grid isn't ready. America's electric grid will be sorely challenged by the need to deliver clean power to those cars. Today, it barely functions in times of ordinary stress and fails altogether too often for comfort, as widespread blackouts in California, Texas, Louisiana, and elsewhere have shown. The study continued to note that by 2030, the nation will need to invest as much as $125 billion in the grid to allow it to handle electric vehicles. The current infrastructure bill before Congress puts about $5 billion toward transmission line construction and upgrades. It takes time and money. A recent study found that many utilities and vehicle fleet managers planning to go electric have yet to fully grapple with all the challenges involved. So, in addition to the 1.5 of electricity needed continuously for the average American household, many of which already have issues with brownouts and power shortages, a warning that there isn't enough energy already in the grid, this additional change to electric cars now requires an upgrade to support that additional 0.93 of continuous power to fulfill the grid demand usage needs. This number doesn't change whether you plug at the house or the filling station. The grid is doing both already. This burden is an overextension of the grid system itself. Mr. Welch gave the following example to help paint the picture of why this system is unworkable. We have a highway. It was built for 100,000 cars a day. When we started off, it had 1,000 cars a day. Years went by, and it was 10,000 cars a day. Years went by again, and it was 60,000 cars a day, and everything kept growing, and suddenly the demand on that highway shot up to 200,000 cars a day. Everything seemed to be getting faster, and then we realized this was not true. Everything was getting slower by 50%, and now life on the road was locked into traffic jams and no moving or growing. Costs are going up to cover the same distance, and progress is stalling. The problem of the world today is not the lack of innovation, it's the global infrastructure congestion of that road. The global grid, local or otherwise, the consumption of electricity far exceeds its availability. Our forefathers who prepared our grid and our system for future growth would have never imagined that we would have reached this level of growth in population. This infrastructure is at its peak, and we have no more to offer, so creating without a worry of where the power will come from, offering blind acceptance by the market, has disappeared. The green movement of today, be it wind, solar, wave, tidal, hydro, or nuclear, isn't set up towards building a bigger grid or to provide more power. This movement is working to shut down major elements, fossil fuels, for their negative effects, to replace them with what the new green movement has to offer in its perception of green and clean. None of this provides a solution to the real issue of stressed overdemand, under-structured grid system for electricity. The shortfall in changing to green energy is one of the major contributors collapsing the world energy grid. The continuous creation of new electrical items, systems, and demands is not being met in any form truly needed. So, growth from the grid is stalled. Our backed-up energy highway is only going to stay this way for years and years to come if we continue to follow this current path. But to make these solutions like electric cars truly feasible in today's world, the first problem that has to be solved is the grid. As it stands now, the infrastructure for that grid will simply not support that energy requirement. The second issue is the continuous reinventing of the supply chain, which needs to become less destructive and more renewable. But addressing these larger, foundational issues means taking a fresh approach and foresight to understand where our current alternative energy models will lead. This means an entirely new way of looking at all business models for industries related to global infrastructure, or any new technology system or advancement towards growing our world's development as it relates to electricity consumption, whether it be farms, factories, new households, etc. The following revolutionary truth was shared by Mr. Welch: instead of new technologies, let's put subsidies into building the grid. Our technologies work, let's fix infrastructure, let us implement our technologies to create a new, clean power grid and build from there. With this work, we can also provide jobs and social growth. Nonprofits and governmental organizations like the UN and Henosis Foundation are already on board because they know the transformational impact this could provide humanity at the fraction of the cost of some of these other less reliable systems. There was bated breath in the room for the insiders who were able to take in this industry breakthrough secret. Development concepts of energy usage beyond the current status quo all need to be rethought. This is where major thought and adjustment is required. We should have, and still can, simply fix the grid. Providing green energy is the new addition until we exceed the doubling of its availability, while upgrading the grid system itself to contain this growth. I've got a simple solution, shared Mr. Engelman. The abundance should be generated along with being maintained. After that, should begin the program of for every kilowatt created, shut down a kilowatt of what is considered not green. In this form, you've already solved half of the grid's energy problem and created half a grid of green energy. This ends the man-made bottleneck of the global grid, or in simple terms, the overall mismanagement of our global energy systems, which are a runaway train of innovation, only without proper system growth for usage and consumption. This is where the necessity for a new model comes in, and what the DIDI technology was designed for, a paradigm shift in how to perceive growth for the future and free us from the congestion of the global infrastructure, an all-inclusive operational circuit of infrastructure design and implementation, along with its own support from manufacturing to usage, delivered without disruption, only advancement to the current infrastructure system. Until this global infrastructure system is fixed and grown, is it possible to support economic progress? The answer is no. But once fixed, innovative products can be advanced to support it again, as a 1,000 flow for a highway built for a 1,000 capability. All the money of the government used in subsidies needs to be applied simply to the global infrastructure fix now, and in doing so it will be able to rebuild itself to accommodate the growth, as it has for the last 100 years. Clean grid investment must be prioritized above all other new energy systems creation. There are not enough tax dollars to afford the subsidies to the products while this process is going on, because it would then require budgets for both, which is not sustainable by the working populace that provides these budgets, or a triple budget needed to grow and absorb. The Washington Post, plug-in cars are the future. The grid isn't ready, agrees with this sentiment, in offering the solution to design a cleaner grid. It would help if the electric grid that fueled these vehicles got a lot cleaner. Electric vehicles would be even cleaner if utilities switched away from coal and natural gas and leaned more heavily on low-emission sources like solar, wind, or nuclear power. The problem here is that's a farce. These short-term life cycle products, excluding nuclear power, are not sustainable. And we all know the issue with nuclear power. It's time to quit listening to bad marketing, i.e. greed for bad, and start demanding real green, long-lasting, recyclable and sustainable systems, i.e. greed for good. This provides growth for the future of the electrical grid along with the growing populations and their needs of power and water, looking out for future generations to come. The report goes on to state that combination could have a powerful impact. One recent study by Carnegie Mellon University found that if America's grid was close to emissions-free, and if about 84% of all vehicle travel was electrified, transportation emissions from light-duty vehicles would fall by 90%. Mr. Engelman continued, so, in the example of Tesla, we need to expand their power generation capability to not only what they consume to manufacture or create, which would be the same for all new growth companies that require electricity for their operations, in addition to the products they sell that require electricity for their use. If we advance our thinking and our model to provide for an export of electricity to the level of the product being sold/generated, then the growth of this product into the grid system will be covered, not only for its creation, but for its use. So, each company or operation needs to know how much their use would be, so it can create an export system of energy at profit, to subsidize the grid to get there and market its goods effectively. To continue with the Tesla example, how much energy would be used by Tesla's electric car needs to be offset by Tesla, at a profit of course, to then be used by the Tesla car. If we wait for the government to get around to taking care of this side of it, or try to use the public to finance it beyond its means, it makes no sense. We would be left waiting for the Tesla car for decades and decades before we can use it without having to shut down the grid with extreme blackouts because of its introduction to the system. And we don't want to do that, we want the car. So, the question becomes, how can we have it alongside all our other power needs? This is the answer. Corporations and companies, with the support of foundations like Henosis, could make this change without much effort. They would simply add a new profit angle to their portfolio and get their subsidy from the nonprofits for the benefit to the people in support of the grid. That would leave the government subsidy to fix the grid for that additional energy. Everyone wins in this scenario. This model should, in fact, apply to all new operations requiring electricity and products adding additional draw from the grid so that growth can be achieved without stalemate, trade-off or destruction or blackouts. So, to offset this and provide the equity/tax dollar needed for use to rebuild its roads and electrical grid, this new model comes into play. It may free the congestion of the highway with the assistance of the foundations and nonprofit support, giving time to the needs of the global businesses and commerce system so those subsidies from the government, by the people, can repair the grid itself for future use. If we want any chance at all of growing through this period, this new model will become a necessity until the time the grid has been restored for another long growth period of uncongested highways. Mr. Welch's knowledge and expertise is clear, and he is not afraid to be bold with his words and to speak blunt and honest truth that people have a right to know. Elon Musk could be seen as a confidence man, or scammer. Those on the harsher side of the spectrum would call him an outright thief. He uses taxpayer dollars to help develop his technologies with tax credits and job concepts while applying for green energy tax credits to build his factories. He positions himself as a green energy frontiersman, but he is selling a product that there is no power to operate. I'm here to expose that great energy secret, because without energy, we have no future. At this point, billions or trillions have been spent on research for personal profit and gain. Dam-free energy is the real solution. But it has been seen as too simple and too safe to strike a corrupt deal because it would actually function to the people's benefit. In conclusion, the land-based wave energy system is a perfect, profitable solution to be applied as the growth system products by companies, corporations, expansions of operations, and more. To provide a satisfactory profitability answer in addition to the development portfolios for the bigger and bigger dream of tomorrow, Diamond Infrastructure Development, Inc. welcomes its alignment with Henosis Foundation and its founding vision to bridge this change, supporting the model to make this possible. We must learn from the tools from almost 1,000 years ago built by Romans and look at the meaning of true sustainability and longevity. This is not today's market of throwaway technology that lasts 15-20 years. We are all now left with the choice: how should we act with this new information that has been presented to us? Those who herald the energetic flame of human history. Those of us that care about our planet share a world vision that, united with these powerful technologies, we can bring to reality the true greatness of the abundance of water and power. Finally, wave energy can be recognized as the world's greatest gift, a sustainable solution to power and water, our civilization's greatest need.